welcome back to another beekeeping episode of Beekeeping Buddies. I'm Steven.
And I'm Luke.
We usually start with Around the Yard, where we talk about what's happening around the apiary. However, I think today we're going to start off by introducing our special guest. We have our first new buddy that's joining us today. Valerie, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for letting me join you guys today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
So in the Around the Yard business, we had an interesting event with our local club last couple of weeks. Was it last weekend?
Last weekend.
Last weekend for us. And where we did a hive opening, and we wanted to just go over basic hive checks and trying to identify some queens and mark some queens. I think that was the first time you had done an activity like that with a group. What do you have any takeaways from your experience there?
Yes.
How many people was it?
It was six people that outside of us.
Pretty
so
small
there's
group.
maybe 8 total.
Yeah.
Small group. I was shocked at the lack of familiarity with being in a beehive.
And this was
in the group.
Primarily beginners that chose to show up for this event.
Yeah, I would say probably beginners. Definitely reflected a beginner level of experience. So there was a lot of hesitation on going through a hive. There was a lot of questions about why things are doing the things that they're doing. And it was a lot of I just expected people to be more comfortable with going through a hive. And that just wasn't there. Or being able to, I guess, identify the different parts of a hive. What's going on with brood, what's going on with eggs, what's going on with larvae, that kind of stuff.
And I think a lot of that stems from basic beginner stuff, which as we've advanced and got experience in beekeeping, I think we fall out of touch with, the challenges there for a lot of the new beekeepers. I see it more because I tend to have a tendency to do a lot more of those events. It's a fairly common occurrence for the people that show up for our open apiary days on Saturdays, because it's specifically designed to reach out to beginners. If you don't have an existing hive, you want to put some hands on. So I'm much more used to it, but it's interesting. It was more interesting in this case because these were all people that had hives and had maybe been working bees this may have been their second year, and the challenges there were still interesting to try to work through as a mentor and teacher. And it sort of leads in nicely to why Val's here as a new beginner, so that we can talk to her about some of the her experience, because she's much newer to beekeeping.
Yeah,
it's much more fresh.
But let's talk about that, right? Because you're not new.
Yes. 4 years.
4
years in. Yep.
So, and how many hives are you running?
I have 4 at home, and I'm managing 2 for the community garden.
Okay.
Yep.
And let's just compare notes. So for those of you that don't know, maybe this is the first episode you're listening to. Welcome if it is. So I'm Luke, and I run about 75, 77 hives, and this is my 10th year, almost 11th year of doing this. And I actually mentored directly under Steve when I first started 11 years ago.
And I started in 2008, and I've maintained about my comfortable number is about 4. I typically work about 5. In middle of summer, I'll get up to 10 as we get splits and swarms and things, and then going into winter, it's probably about 6, and then I come out with about 3, and we rinse and repeat. So that's where I'm at.
Right.
And so did you start? You didn't start with 4. How many did you start with?
No, I started with 2. So the main suggestion that I heard from everybody was start with 2 hives. You'll be able to compare them to each other. I would say for me it was very overwhelming to go from 0 hives and go to 2 hives. So I know that's great advice to give to new beekeepers, so that and I indeed had 2 hives that performed very differently from each other. One was like a rock star and went, I bought 2 packages. Let me preface by saying that. So I started out with 2 packages, but I had one that was a rock star and took off, and one that was kind of lagging behind. We were approaching midsummer, and it was still not doing that well. I think if I was to do it all over again, I would start with a nuke, or I would start with one, and then I would get I would participate in those open hive days to get more experience with other people working the hive, getting more comfortable asking some of those questions that I wanted to ask. It was right in the middle of the pandemic when it started, and I didn't feel comfortable. So I'm part of Central Illinois Beekeepers Association. It's over in Bloomington. I didn't really feel comfortable being too close to people at the time because of the times we were in.
Sure.
So I made those friends via Facebook, called them, asked those questions, and then I would go into my own hive and learn for myself.
So that's actually, there's a couple good lessons there. One of them is as clubs, right? How do you do your advertising to get new people? Because, I mean, you're out of Peoria, so the local club in Peoria is Heart of Illinois Beekeeping Association. Yet you found SIBA before us. And we've talked offline, Steve and I have talked offline in the past about this. SIBA has a much more populated Facebook page, much more active Facebook page, and I think they draw a lot of people because of that. Ours tends not to be. But so if you're listening and you're running a club, maybe that's something to be aware of. The second one is you talked about being overwhelmed, going from 0 to 2 hives because that's what everyone told you. So I do run classes. I know we said that I don't usually run hive opening events, and that's true. But I do run classes, and I actually changed my classes specifically because I thought that 8 hours of information from a fire hose was not something you could actually take in and then walk away with 2 hives, and then you're just totally overwhelmed, and you're trying to you're trying to tread water as you're trying to learn from the clubs you're in. I always suggest 2 hives and a nuke is what I suggest, and the nuke box is just empty. It's just oh my gosh, what do I do now box. So
well, the number of beginners that also like, hey, I see people catching swarms, and I want to catch some swarms to get started. That nuke box certainly allows you to do that in terms of, and a couple of my beginners, they've been successful in overwintering for the first time, which I understand this has been your first winter to do that.
Yeah, this has been my first overwinter.
And then they get to their second spring with an overwintered hive, and all of a sudden they got queen cells, and they want to make splits, and they don't have extra equipment. I'm like, hey, this is an opportune time to use that 5-frame nuke box to make some splits and move from there.
Or the opposite, they want to split in the first day of May, and there's no drones, so you just setting up for tragedy.
So the other things we've been doing around the yard, we last week on our Droning On segment, we talked about things that were going to be coming up, and we mentioned grafting. We did, in fact, do some grafting.
We did.
It's been a hot minute since we did that. How many years has it been? Did we do it last year? I don't think we did.
Not.
No,
I did it on my own last year. I raised 3 queens doing it, and ended up using all my queens. So we need to make more than 3.
But
yeah, it's been a minute, and it takes a little bit of a touch.
We came into it. I brought the grafting tools, and you made a cell builder, and we had set that up, and then you found a frame of eggs, and I forgot that I had built you a nice little frame stand to graft off of, which was really nice. I walked into his honey house that we worked on, and there was a nice little grafting station all set up with your magnifying glass and light. I was like, man, I forgot my magnifying glass and light because the last time we did this, I brought one.
Yeah, magnifying glass, light, and it has the air conditioner, but it was a nice day. It was like 70 degrees, so 75. So it was a good day to just be out of the sun and graft.
And finding that grafting tool that you like is a real thing because I bought a multi-pack, like a 25-pack of the cheap Chinese grafting tools off of Amazon, and they've got is it a feather or a piece of reed? I thought it was a piece of reed.
It is. So I went and looked it up. It's a piece of bamboo. It's a slice of bamboo.
Yeah.
I thought now the old ones are like bull horn.
I was going to say some sort of
shaved.
horn.
Yeah. So it has that little bit of flexibility to it, like a fingernail flexibility.
And so it tapers down to a piece of paper-thin material, and it's got flex to it. And that's the Chinese grafting tools. Those are the ones we were using as opposed to the several other different kinds. And getting it to bend up so you can scoop up your little larvae, your teeny tiny larvae, is a real thing.
Yeah.
And then gently place them in a cup. And I guess that process wasn't as successful as we were hoping.
It wasn't. By the time, so I had gone through and built that cell builder, and for those that don't know, you basically are making a really crowded hive. You can do it. I've seen it done in 5-frame, 6-frame nukes. I've seen it done in a 10-frame. I made a 10-frame, and I had gone through and squished the queen cells to make them hopelessly queenless that they had made, and I didn't go back and check it before putting the grafted cells that we had done in there, and they had said, screw you, if you're going to do that, we'll just make other queen cells on the same frame. We'll just choose different larvae. And so there was probably 10 queen cells on that frame. By the time I pulled ours, grafted ones, there was 10 other capped queen cells on the frame before ours was anywhere close to being capped. So that it didn't work out.
Not exactly the plan, because if you're building a cell builder, you're not the frames you're pulling for that is just nurse bees. You just want some nurse bees, and you're not necessarily selecting for the genetics, right? Well, the whole reason of doing the grafting is we've specifically pulled a frame of open brood eggs of the genetics, of the hive temperaments, of whatever we want specifically to graft off of. So that's kind of why the ones that are left in the cell builder are not necessarily as exciting as having our grafts take. But I think we're gonna take a second shot at it.
Yep. So we had one success that looks like a success. We're not sure. It's a nice, beautifully drawn, like really nicely drawn queen cell. So I might have to take it and put it in a nuke box or something. But yeah, that's where we're at right now with that. We'll try again.
Let's swing back to Val and
Hi.
and ask and ask you a little bit more about your journey in beekeeping.
All right.
How did you initially become interested in beekeeping?
I got into beekeeping by looking into how do people keep bees through mead. So I started following this YouTube channel called City Steading, and they show you how to brew your own meads, your own wines, other alcoholic beverages. Not that I was really looking for that. I just found the whole process very interesting, and I was just like, oh, I'm an engineer. I can do measure densities. I can measure all that. That's very interesting. And then
it's funny actually. Everybody at the table. So we're all just so you know, all of our backgrounds. So you're an engineer.
Yep.
I was a biomedical engineer with an electrical engineering background. Steve's a mechanical engineer.
Apparently,
we're all
engineers.
So if the conversation's riveting, it's because we're engineers.
But it was this. I got into because it was this specific set of steps that you had to follow to get this particular result, and the whole calculation of you start with this amount of honey and this specific gravity was very interesting. And then from there, it was a natural progression to how do you even get honey? And there's another podcast on Apple. It's called Honeybee Man. And this guy just made, 10 or 15 episodes talking about here's how you become a beekeeper. He started in like 2007. I think it ran through 2008. And I started listening to some of those. And it was just fascinating. Beekeeping was just fascinating. So I did all this research. I read all about it. And I said, yeah, that's an interesting hobby that I'll never do. I'll never pick that up. But during the pandemic, after my dog died, I needed something that would keep me more outside. I needed something that would keep me active during the summer. So I've been talking about beekeeping this, beekeeping that, and a friend of mine said, you should really just go for it. What do you have to lose? Just try it out. And so that's jumped off and never looked back.
That's an interesting. It's always an interesting how everyone comes to beekeeping differently. What about the first question I have is how did the mead turn out? Was it decent? Was it drinkable?
Mead, when I made all different sorts of mead. I still have some in the back of my refrigerator. Mead needs time to mellow.
Yep.
And the first meads I had were nice. for some reason, I thought I was going to go for like this high percentage alcohol mead, and they were hot. And when I say hot, it's like paint thinner.
Yeah,
it's like,
it is like drinking.
It burns.
Yeah, it's like drinking nail polish.
Yeah, it burns.
I've also made mead, which is why I'm asking, right? So my first mead was miserable. I thought it was miserable, and I kind of just left it in a bucket.
Yep.
For a year because I was so disappointed in how it turned out. And then I came back to it before I dumped it out.
And it's nice.
It was really good.
It's nice. And it's just like, how did we go from this to that?
Yeah.
So the meats that I have now are probably 3 or 4 years old in the back of my refrigerator. They are delicious.
Yeah.
But you have to give them time to just, don't aim for like the 15, 20 something. You don't have to do a fortified wine. Aim for a nice, low percentage alcohol. And then B, give it time to mellow.
Yeah. Well, and if you don't, I found out too, so I've been doing it for a while, like 5 years or so.
Oh, wow.
I found out that if you don't stress out the mead so much, the yeast, it actually doesn't take that much time to mellow. Mm-hmm. So if you get a cooling bag, they sell cooling bags. So you basically freeze 2-liter bottles of water. You put them in the bag around when you're doing it, and it keeps the temperature down so it doesn't stress the mead. So you don't get as much of the fingernail polish. Not as much as the ether change they have to break down. But as far as that, right? Like, so did you join beekeeping communities when you started?
Yes, I joined Central Illinois Beekeepers Association. I'm really trying to remember because, Steve, you and I talked about HOI. This was probably 2019 or early 2000. So you and I talked about that. And I don't remember how I got into SEBA, but I must have searched for it. I must have been on Facebook, but somehow I made my way to SEBA. So I ended up joining SEBA in 2021. I became their secretary in 2023, so I hold their secretary board position of the Beekeeping Association.
You're an active member, right, of SEBA then?
Yep.
So what's your takeaway there?
I like being able to have a bit of a say on what we're going to show new beekeepers next. Maybe I don't want to speak for the whole board, but I'm just speaking for myself. But being more of a new beekeeper, I'm like, why don't we show people? Why don't we bring in more scientists, or why don't we bring in more people to do this? Why bring in more people to do that? I like being able to be that newer beekeeper voice. Like, I don't remember. I don't know how to do that yet, so let me, give that voice to it and say, "Hey, you guys remember when you were brand new?"
Yeah.
Like, let's give them more of this, and then I also like putting in more of the QR codes and more of the video, because, like you were talking about, an 8-hour course where you just sit and you watch, and so I like putting in more of the multimedia into that because that's what helped me learn is being able to watch it. Read it, yes, because engineer, but follow instructions. But being able to watch it and be like, oh, I messed this up, I won't repeat that again. So,
when we've talked about before the challenges that our club faces in terms of trying to transition to ensure that it stays sustainable for membership in terms of as an older, more established beekeeper community continues to retire from beekeeping, and how do you attract the next?
Well, how do you retain your seasoned beekeepers? Because that's a question I always ask when I'm joining clubs. Because I don't know how many times I've actually talked about or listened to presentations on Varroa, but it gets really frustrating as an older beekeeper, both older age-wise and older in years doing it, that I'm just like, how many times do I want to actually hear about Varroa, especially from like the same speakers? If it came from different speakers, then I tend to glean more information off it. But having the same speakers talk about the same thing over and over is pretty frustrating for me as an older beekeeper.
So bringing different opinions and different points of view with different subjects, I think, is probably
and new research, right? There's new research done all the time in beekeeping. So like, let's bring it forward. Let's hear about it. Speaking
of some of the challenges, Val, what would you say some of the biggest challenges you faced as a new beekeeper? I know there's a lot from the other beekeepers, the other beginners I've worked with, they've talked about the overwhelming amount of equipment they have to learn, or perhaps they're challenged with identifying all of the stuff in a hive. I don't know what to look at. Or it can be simply just getting in the beehive. Is any of those, what of those are perhaps your most challenging?
So it wasn't the equipment, and it wasn't identifying the type of bees or the phases of a bee goes through as it's going from an egg to a larva to a pupa to cap brood. It wasn't that for me. I read a lot. I had a lot of time before the season started in 2021. So I did a lot of reading. I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and it was just kind of like every night watching and learning more. And so when I actually got my hands on a hive, it was just like, oh, that's what that is. That's what that is. It was getting comfortable with. It was getting comfortable with being in a hive. That was really the big thing. And for years and years growing up, you hear a bee by your ear, you just start swatting at it and waving at it. But it was finding my zen moment when I was in the hive, lifting up a frame, knowing that I had to move slowly and purposefully, because I would often find myself making jerky movements or getting in there being really rough, and the bees responded. They didn't respond very gracefully to that. I ended up smashing a lot of bees and over smoking them, so they would go bzzz, when they get really hot and they really annoyed.
Yeah, it's the intro to our show.
So that was really my challenge. But I'll tell you what I did is, this is not a visual podcast, is it?
No, that's all right.
We're not recording today. No.
I'll tell you what I did is every day I took out the same frame, and it was a frame that I popped the foundation off of, and I just put a little bit of wax on it. And every day I popped out the same frame, took about 10 seconds of video. I wanted to see how quickly they would fill out that frame, but then that was also an effort for me to get comfortable with going out to the hive.
Do you have a YouTube video of it?
No, but I have all the videos I have all the 10-second videos that I
we'll
compiled.
throw it. You send it to me. We'll throw it up. We'll give you credit for it. We'll throw it up. On
Sure.
Yeah.
But every day, 10 seconds, okay, they started this, they did this, they did this. And that was me getting comfortable being in the hive, not using smoke, pulling out a frame, and then being comfortable enough taking out my phone and taking that video, because I was so hesitant to just take that little bit of video, because I'm like, they're going to sting me. They don't care about me. They're working. They're doing their thing.
Yeah. That's. I would say that is a major portion. Again, going back to the initial classes, it's a major portion of missing from initial classes is the hands-on portion of it, where you realize they have the aha moment. They don't care about me. Like that's like yes. Are there going to be some that care about you?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes,
right. There's going to, and especially in hives have personalities. There's going to be.
Yes.
I call them the Putin hives, right? So they're usually my first one was all black Russians, and they really did not want to be messed with. They didn't sting you, but man, they were right in your face. I remember the story about telling Steve about it, and I was like, hey. I have a hive that acts a little bit. I was new. I was like, I got a hive that acts a little bit different. They're all black bees, and as soon as you're in there, man, they're all in your veil. And he's like, it's not a big deal. I think you came with a veil off, and you're like, yeah, let's get into them. And you opened up the hive.
I don't know if I came veil off, but we definitely started on not that hive.
Not that hive.
And I'm like, I saw you open up the hive, and you're like, it's a beehive. I want it. And it looks like, well. That's not the hive. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we'll go to the other one. And we popped the lid off.
I think it was the fifth hive end. It was like
I thought it was just the two the first year.
It was a fourth or fifth. It was my second or third year.
Yeah, and we popped the lid and poof, they made themselves known.
And I remember even took a step back. He's like, oh, and I'm like, yep, this is the one.
Like, yep. I'm like, let me guess, this is the one. So yeah, they were, but that. Harkens back to my initial when I got my first split from the beekeeper that I worked with my first year. And he's like, well, these are going to be a little hot, and being the first hive I was in, I had a suit and everything, and I got stung once or twice, and I was like, dude, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I took off back to the truck, and he's laughing and pulling some more frames out. He's like, oh yeah, he's a new guy. Yeah, they're a little spicy, and
yeah. It's scary. That's the other thing. Like that they don't tell you during class. I don't know a beekeeper that ever started that didn't open the hive that first time, and you hear especially if they got a little propolis on the top, and you hear the pop and it crunches and the top lid comes off, even if you're careful. And then the bees do a little hum, right? Because hey, you're in here. And I don't know a single beekeeper that didn't have that first reaction being, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like what's going? Fear is that first reaction, I think, and we're raised to be afraid of things that hurt you, right? So
would you recommend to new beginners that they try to find a mentor or a group that has an opportunity for them to put hands on bees before they get their first equipment?
I think that's a bit of a challenge. If you have a nice warm day in March, then yeah, contact a bee mentor while they're taking off their winter stuff. I don't think I took my winter stuff off until late March, early April, so I was not going in there very often. So that's also around the time packages and nukes and things start to arrive. So I don't know how long that is, but absolutely yes, you need a mentor. Absolutely, absolutely, 100% yes, you need a mentor to at least talk you off the ledge when you're saying, I can't do this, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not doing a good job. No, you're doing just fine. Just pace yourself, go slowly, don't rush, and watch and see what the bees are doing, and just see where they're at.
So I know you started your beekeeping journey back in the pandemic when getting together was more difficult, but since then, have you had people out to work your hives with you?
No, and I need to, well, excuse me, I shouldn't say no. My mom and I work. So my mom's also a beekeeper. She's a 3-year beekeeper. So we worked my hives together. So the year after, in 2022, she got her first hive. So we started working her hive together, and we would sometimes work my hives together, especially when I need to take honey off of my hive, and it was easier to have 2 people work it. So,
and did you already mention that you are? I think you mentioned that you were working 2 of the hives at the community garden.
Yes, I am.
And are they involved? You have other volunteers from that group involved in your beekeeping? Or they're just like, oh my God, those are the bees. We're not going anywhere close.
We got a grant from the Peoria Police Department, and it's been helping to educate youth about gardening. And so the lady whose garden it is, my mother's community garden, the lady whose garden it is, she does all the gardening. She has the kids help out with that, and I do the beekeeping. So we bought them suits, we bought them gloves, we bought them veils, and then we said, "Come on over here. You're going to start doing beekeeping." They're like, "No."
Yeah.
So we had to start saying, "Okay, you're in a rotation."
I was going to say
you're going to go learn about bees this weekend. This week you're going to spend an hour or so with Valerie, and so I would step them through. Here's what eggs look like. Here's what larva looks like. Here's what drawn comb looks like. Here's what new nectar looks like.
So you are
they help a little bit.
A little bit.
They help a little bit.
But more to the point, you are filling some of that mentor status
Yes.
in terms of working bees with somebody else that's less experienced.
Yes. Yep. I hope they enjoy it. They're still a little bit hesitant, but I'm like, you got all the protection gear on. What are you hesitant about?
So do you know if any of those kids have gone back to mom and dad and be like, hey, they got this really cool hive. We should get one of these because I want to do beekeeping.
Not only that, right? So say that they do. What advice would you give them? What advice do you give to those people that are just starting on beekeeping?
Man, dive in.
Dive in. All right.
You're going to be scared. You're going to feel like you don't know what this is about. And I'm still there with you. I don't know what this is about either. So, but my advice would be dive in and don't be afraid of making mistakes, because you're going to make some and you're going to learn from them. So for kids, I would be like, make sure you have a parent or somebody to help you out with that, because I know some of the aside from some of the boxes getting heavy when you're when it's time to harvest honey,
yeah.
It would be easier to have someone there, a parent or a guardian, being like, you know what, you're doing a good job, giving a little bit of encouragement and being like, don't worry about it, you're doing okay, keep going. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's probably lacking in the beekeeping world in general, right? Most beekeepers stop beekeeping after their second year.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's about I think it's like a 90% stoppage after year 2.
I can tell you that first year, I thought that my hive had overwintered. It was really just being robbed out. That was that hurt so bad having to clean out that hive and just feeling like, or sorry, not that hive, 2 hives, and just feeling like I've failed them.
Yeah.
I've failed them.
Yep, we've talked about that. It is an emotional attachment with an insect that would prefer that you leave them alone. But it is an emotional, like every time, like now, I've killed so many bees. I've tell people I've killed more bees as a beekeeper than I ever did before.
Yes.
And on accident, heck, even on purpose. There's a hive that was a nasty hive that I just could not do anything with, and I didn't need those genetics in the world, and I had to euthanize the hive. But it still feels bad. That one didn't feel as bad. Man, those guys were, those were mean. But most of the rest of them felt really.
Well, and, every time we do a mite check, right, there goes 300. 300 are donating their service for the health of the colony.
And this is the first year I'm comfortable squishing queens, or basically I kill them in alcohol, but culling queens out of my colonies. This is the first one that I don't feel that I'm like, okay, I'm doing this for the betterment of the hive, whether you guys realize it or not. I'm doing this so you guys survive. And this is the first year I'm really comfortable with grabbing the queen, being like, nope, I gave you a chance. You've had your window. We need to move on.
And I know offline we've talked about some of the real differences. If you go watch any commercial beekeeper, there's a number of beekeepers on YouTube that are commercial beekeepers, and their approach to beekeeping seems so entirely different from a hobbyist's.
It is, and they are. It's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem. It is like, different.
It's one thing, right? Because your first reaction is, well, it's a business, but it's more than that, right? It's they don't have the time and effort to sort of coax along these, because we've all had the sort of the week, you talked about it, one of your first packages you got, it's just sort of this week limping along hive. And for the commercial guys, they have so much experience because they've seen so many hives, are like, no, they can immediately identify, hey, this is not a performing hive, and we're just going to go ahead and replace the queen because they're making queens, right? And so they're just going to go ahead and replace the queen and try to restart that hive and get it be productive in its apiary. And that should probably be a goal for all of us in terms of ensuring that, because ultimately a productive hive is going to be a healthier hive. It's going to have a higher chance of survival through the winter.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. Certainly the size of your hive through winter I think has been has a real direct correlation, especially in the Midwest.
I subscribe to natural beekeeping, or at least initially. I hope I'm not making any enemies here.
No. When you say natural, are you talking about treatment-free, or are you talking about...
And it took me time when the 2 hives that I had died, it took me time to realize that natural beekeeping did not mean treatment-free beekeeping necessarily. And so I was seeing things that I didn't know were due to varroa. Like I was seeing chronic bee, I think it's like paralysis, something
bee
where
paralysis,
the bees have no hair on them.
Oh,
they're kind of like deformed.
Deformed bee virus. There's deformed bee virus, which also there's some interesting news about that. But
they're wandering around, or they're just going around in circles. And I was seeing that, and I was just like, nah, I'm probably managing these well enough. And it was that naivete that I was like, that caused me to lose both of my hives. I have an unpopular opinion. I don't do the mite checks. I just treat. So I just use the Formic Pro strips, or I use the ones that the vertical ones that go in.
Apamane?
Not Apamane.
Apistan?
The ones that have the little
Apgar?
Epigar?
I thought that was the little round.
The Apigar is the one that you peel off.
Yeah.
The strips that you put in, that sit up vertically.
I've seen them, but I don't
Yeah.
know the names of them.
So I've not used those. I have used Formic Pro.
Yes.
So I just treat. I feel that bad about killing them, but my overwintered hive, I'm going to have to start making sure that they're okay because they're exploding out of control. But
Yeah.
I just treat to make sure whatever we got, we're going in clean into the winter.
So with 75 hives, I spot check my hives, so I can't go through 75 and get good counts for everyone. So, and because a lot of my hives are in one yard, if that yard shows like 2 or 3 hives with high mite count, then I have to treat all of the hives just due to drift. I have quite a bit of drift just because of the way my hives are set up. So I can't take a chance and say we're doing this. But yeah, I still think a beekeeper should know. I disagree with the just not doing any mite checks because we should know, even if you're totally treatment free, you should still know what your mite counts are, just so you have a cause and effect view of what may be happening. Right? Like that is an important, a holistic view and an honest holistic view of what's happening to your hives, I think is an important part of beekeeping. Because I still will find myself trying to be the optimist and be like, no, they'll be okay. Like, yeah, they look funny, but I can walk them through that. They'll be fine.
I think this year with 4 hives at my house, I'm going to have to make sure that they're all good.
Yeah.
Well, it was different when I just had one.
Yep.
And it was just like, okay, well, this one, I can focus on this one. I can give it all of my attention. I'm starting to run out of time to look at the 4 different hives and make sure they are okay. So this year...
I'm just saying, retirement's pretty nice.
Don't tempt me with a good time. Don't tempt me with a good time now. Mm-hmm. I hope that wasn't an unpopular opinion about treatment, about not...
It is a reoccurring sentiment that a lot of beekeepers, a lot of new beekeepers have that they want to be
not killing a whole bunch of bees. That's
No.
something that I feel bad about is killing bees.
No.
I know this year I'm going to have to do the mite check.
No.
But I just treat now.
What
treat.
you're saying is want to be treatment free.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
want to be treatment free. I
Right.
want to treat. I want to treat, and that's basically what I do. Is regardless of whatever
Yeah.
happens, I treat.
And there's a lot of sentiment of new beginners that come into this and they do a lot of reading and they're like, hey, the mites are a problem, but like everything I read says you got to put all these chemicals on the hive, and I don't want to do that for my bees because I want to be organic and I want to be natural and I want to be all these things. And you're like, well,
Yeah, then they die, and then they die, and then you're just like,
that's a thing.
oh.
Yeah, I'm like, well, you can do that, but the probability of success for that is going to be extremely low. Mm-hmm. If you did a lot of external things, like when I first started beekeeping, we didn't have the treatments we have today, and so there was a lot of other things. You'd run screen bottom boards, and you do powdered sugar shakes, and you could run green boards, and maybe you run small cell foundation. So there was all these other things that you could do to help manage your mite levels. And if you're going to be really proactive and do all of those things, maybe you get away with not doing an oxalic acid or Formic Pro or something like that. But the reality is, as a beginner, you get so many other challenges in terms of the other things that you need to become comfortable with in terms of manipulating the hive and manipulating the frames and being able to identify all of the things you need to identify, that doing all of the things you need to do to manage mites is just like that much more that it just becomes unsustainable in terms of the expectations for a new beginner. And so I've seen plenty of students, plenty of beginners come into the beekeeping world with that opinion. And by the second year, they're either not doing it because nothing overwintered, or they have significantly changed their attitude, kind of like you, in terms of, hey, I see now that I have to change my approach to this in order for my bees to be successful. Because ultimately, I think for all beekeepers, they want their hives to be successful.
Yes, and they want healthy hives, and they want hives that will not proliferate their mites to everybody else in the neighborhood, or to even the other 2 or 3 hives that they might be keeping at home. Because when I tell you, I looked at all of those bees that were struggling. It wasn't just one bee that was hairless. It was a whole bunch of them that were struggling around. And I'm just kind of like, what am I even looking at? If I had done just a little bit of research, I would have figured out, okay, this is a problem. And I didn't realize that the more natural beekeeping meant all of those other things that you described, because all of those other things add up to having a healthy hive.
Right.
That maybe you don't have to put formic-pro in, or you don't have to do oxalic, but you have to do all those other things. And
right.
That could be very overwhelming.
Well, I think that wraps up all of our questions we have specifically for Val in her early her early start to the beekeeping journey. Do you want to talk about some things we've read in the news?
Yeah, let's talk about some news stories. There's some actually really interesting news stories. Val read about it too. You want to talk about new vaccines coming out?
I didn't read it. I saw. I bookmarked it to say, I gotta read about that a little bit later. But you go. Go ahead.
AFB has an approved vaccine out for honeybees that is carried through the genetic code of the queen. Is my understanding, through the gut bacteria. It's still being tested. They're still looking at it, but it's been approved. So it's out there. They have some really good results from it.
I have not read about this. Is there? I don't foresee being able to reach in and give all my little bees shots.
No. So it's the food. Like you feed the queen, and her gut bacteria passes on to the rest of the bees. And so you inoculate the queen, and it passes it through the hive.
So we'll have a feed or a powder or something we sprinkle on it.
From my understanding of it, it's a feed of some sort right now. Then they're also looking at being able to inoculate some royal jelly, and then you would graft your queens with inoculated royal jelly underneath them.
Interesting.
And then
that'll be a thing.
And then that's how you have your inoculated AFB. They're also using it to form wing virus, and there's something else that they're looking into.
How about EFB? Because we have much more problems with EFB.
Well, EFB is a different.
It is,
right? It's a spore.
No, AFB. I thought AFB was a spore.
AFB is a spore. You're right.
And EFB
is the other
bacteria.
One. Bacteria. Yeah, this is for So this is for American foulbrood. They specifically said American foulbrood. So. Yeah. I haven't heard anything about that one. That's so. But if it works, my understanding was before. I was really excited to hear it because my understanding from it was before that was because of a lot of the bees' immune systems. Immune system is located in their gut, and it actually has an impact on the forage. Or the forage has an impact on their health because it impacts their immune system. And because of that, they were having a really difficult time with vaccines for things, because another one they were looking for was like a feed to give bees that killed varroa mites, because it eats the fat body, and if you can give them a feed that poisons the mite, it's not entirely different than the neonicotinoids that I complain about all the time that we use on our crops, right?
Or most of any of our genetically modified foods that are like, that's all how our roundups work and stuff like that, right?
So anyway, but the one that got approved recently was for AFB, and there's a couple of podcasts that covered it. It's pretty interesting. I'm really happy that we continue to do work out there for our honeybees to make things easier and better for everyone.
Speaking of better for the bees, Nature magazine also featured some new research about sunflowers and the benefits that the sunflowers bring to our bees in terms of reduced nosema infections.
Yes, yeah. Actually, sunflower pollen specifically, right? And how that affects honeybees. And it has a measurable, not only just honeybees, too, bumblebees, wild pollinators. The American Bee Journal actually ran a story about bison and buffalo and how they impacted honeybees. So the latest month. And that within that story, you kind of have to dig for it. There's it links to the Nature article where they actually did the study on sunflowers and how that impacts pollinators, specifically bees, and how that increases goes back to their gut health, how that increases their gut health and actually makes them less susceptible to nosema and other viruses.
So the short version is plant some sunflowers around your garden.
And tell your neighbors to plant some. Give some neighbors some sunflowers.
We purposefully planted some sunflowers in the community garden. I read earlier that the pollen is not very nutritionally dense or great for the bees, but there was this causation or correlation that the bees that were closer to sunflowers had lower instances of varroa. So there was this relationship between number of sunflowers and decreased numbers of varroa in those.
So those studies always make me wonder
colonies.
If it's the health of the bees. So you have healthier bees that had do a better job of removing varroa from their sisters, right? So like it's not necessarily. So you have bees that feel better, so they do more things. So that's always in my back of my head. I'm like, I wonder if that's actually how that works, because it's really difficult for me to go. The varroa mite, who is largely it's still we're learning more about it, but it's still pretty much a mystery to a lot of beekeepers, right? Like how's a sunflower going to help with knocking off varroa mites? But I also like them because there's specifically, especially in the Midwest, we have specifically bees that are really good at varroa. So if you watch your sunflowers, there's some bees on there that look like honeybees. They're not honeybees, but they really like pollinating those flowers. And so by doing that, you're supporting not just honeybees, but you're supporting other pollinators in your area.
Well, let's move on to our last segment of the show, Droning On, where we talk about what's going to be coming up between now and the next time we get together. And for me, it's probably going to be with prepping, making sure my honey supers are not getting overly full, making sure that because we'll probably, if you've had a good, strong spring flow, you might be pulling honey right now to extract. I think you were doing that for a couple of your hives, right, Luke?
Yeah. Actually, some of the people I care for their hives for, I pulled 70 pounds off of one. I've got another probably 30 or 40 pounds to pull off another. And I think I have...
So are you putting those back on wet? Or those...
Yep, I'm throwing them right back on wet, which basically means, right, I've gone through, I've spun them, and then I just go back out as soon as I can, put them right back on the top of the hives.
So making sure my honey supers aren't getting over full and adding stuff to it. It's also coming into early summer where we're going to start being concerned about our mite levels. So I think we'll be doing a mite check. We'll be demonstrating a mite check with an easy. Is it Easy Check?
Yeah,
is that
Easy
the name,
Check,
Brain?
something like that.
Yeah,
Easy
Valerie's
Check.
nodding over here.
Yep.
So we'll demonstrate doing a mite check out at the club hives this weekend, and extracting is in July 4th is when I typically I do that. I haven't been in mine. I'll probably have. I was hoping for more, but of course, my how strong hives that overwintered, they swarmed on me, and they're short on population now, so they're not bringing in the honey crop like I was hoping. But it's always a challenge from year to year. I'll have something, maybe not as much as I was hoping, but.
Well, the Illinois River flooded this year too, and so it drowned all of my river plants.
Oh yeah.
So I've got lots of clover coming in. It's really interesting. I don't have the river flow that I normally have just because the river was so high for so long. So it'll be an interesting year. It'll be a different tasting honey crop for certain, just because the flowers aren't there. Yeah, I think Val's got honey to pull. Do you have honey to pull?
Yes, I do. And my neighbors 2 doors over have lavender. And so all of my spring honey ends up tasting of lavender. So I got a whole 10-frame medium that I got to pull off like this weekend and come see you and use your extractor.
I was going to ask if you had a full extractor set up.
I don't, but if I expand further than 4 hives, which I would like to,
4 hives.
I got to think about it.
4 hives is enough. If you get a couple of 2 or 3 to overwinter, you'll be pulling 50 pounds off a hive. That's you need to.
Yeah.
But hey, if you're a member of the local club, they may have equipment that you can borrow
They also
from.
Yeah, but
they do.
Sometimes it's difficult to get to. But
They
can't
do.
be.
They're an hour away, and that's not so bad. But they
But
do.
the local one has one too.
Oh, the local one. Oh, okay,
Yeah, the local one. Yes.
Yeah, they also have an extractor.
So reach out in your area to your local beekeeper. Might be a reason to join your local club if they have community equipment that you can borrow specifically for extracting.
Okay.
Because it's an expensive setup that you're going to only use one time a year for only a day at a time. So it's sort of the kind of equipment that makes sense to have.
I always thought I was going to use mine one time a year. Last year, I think I used mine 6 times.
Sir, did you remember when you said you had 75 hives?
No, I'm only supposed to have 2.
For those of us at the table with numbers in the single digits, we use it once a year.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
However, I bought mine, I think, it probably wasn't the second year. It may have been the third year. Because I borrowed the mentor, the guy that I started with. He reluctantly allowed me to borrow the extractor. Well, so there was a story there. Oh. I built a chicken plucker, and he raised.
Is it the same? Steve still has a chicken plucker.
I still have a chicken plucker.
Is it the same one?
What is a chicken plucker?
It has fingers that pluck chickens after you.
Yeah. So if you're going to raise broiler chickens and you want to defeather them, it's the device you put them in to defeather them after you scald them.
It's amazing. As an engineer, I looked at it and I'm like, this is amazing.
I forgot you have attended that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is pretty amazing.
So he was reluctant to lend his extractor, and then he found out I had a chicken plucker, and he come down and look at my chicken plucker, and he's like, can I borrow the chicken plucker? I says, I tell you what, you can borrow my chicken plucker if I can borrow your extractor. And he looked at me and was like, we could do that deal. So my second year when I had honey extract, I used his, and then the third year we were like, okay, this is going to be a thing we're going to be doing long term, and we really liked the honey, and so then we bought into at the time it was an $800 kit from Dayton with the whole extracting tank and everything, and it was just before Maxent came out with their nice 6 or 8 frame radial that was like it's just like an inch larger in diameter, so it's like almost identical in size. But if I had just waited like another couple months, I could have gotten the nice radial one instead of the tangential one I have. But I've used it
I have the radial one,
2010 or something,
and I struggle with getting some of the honey out of it sometimes. You really have to spin it.
Your encapping has to be good,
and I've uncapped enough frames now that it's good. I just struggle with getting some of the little bit of extra honey out of the end.
Okay, so for a novice beekeeper who this is my first year overwintering, my 10-frame hive is going like gangbusters. Where's that tipping point of, okay, do I go ahead and make that investment and get? I'm probably not going to get like a big uncapping setup, but where's that tipping point if I should go ahead and make that investment and get an extractor? Because next year, for next year, I'm looking at where can I start putting these hives? And I'm like, well, maybe I can go buy a little piece of land and put like 10 hives on them, and then I'm going to get up to 20 hives, and I'm going to be done. That I'm going to try to maintain there. So where's the tipping point?
So I've answered this question several times for other people. I know for myself, I was 3 years in, and I was working 2 to 4 hives at the time. And when I in 2000. Would have been like 2010, your options for extractors were basically like only the major suppliers, Kelly, Dayton, Man Lake, people like that. And those setups were really, really expensive. Like I said, it was $800. And so we knew it was going to be a commitment in terms of cost. However, since then, the number of low-cost overseas alternatives, China, that has come in with extractors, both in terms of just simple 2 frames, but also relatively good 4-frame extractors that can compete with my Dayton. Their prices are shockingly reasonable now. A 2-frame extractor on Amazon is like, what, $150, maybe $200? Is Luke looking at his phone right now?
$100.
$100.
Oh.
Right? And so in terms of how many years do I have to put off? Like the first year I did crush and strain or some other way of trying to get honey out of it. I mean, it was a big muss. I saw this thing where you could just cut some off the frame and let it sit there and drip. You know,
For days?
For days. You know, and you're like, yeah, you did that? How did it go for you? There was like, it took forever. Like, yes, it did. And so now you're wanting the extractor. Yes. Well, you know, for $100. In terms of what that $100 means, like if you're interested at all about trying to market it, because like for the average beekeeper, they may like honey, but your average hive likes 50 pounds, right? Like it's a 5-gallon bucket, right? Like you're going to go through an entire 5-gallon bucket yourself. I'm like, you're dedicated. Now, if you're using mead like you are, you might go through that. But for the average beekeeper, you know, that's a lot of honey to eat, which probably means you've got some left over to sell to, you know, you give some away to family and friends, but you probably can scrounge up some honey cells there. And at $10 a pound, you're only talking about 10 pounds. Well, a quart is about 3 pounds. So you're only talking about 3 quarts you got to sell before you're breaking even on a $100 extractor, right? So in terms of what my advice is for beginners these days, if you're getting through that second year and you're liking it and you're being successful, especially if you've got an overwintered hive that you know you're going to pull a honey crop off of, I would definitely be looking at investing a $200 in an extracting setup.
But hold on. When you say extracting setup, I'm talking about that is a knockoff 2-frame.
Yep.
And if you're planning for long term,
Yep.
that is not the extractor that I would immediately buy for for something that's like, I have a vision for this. I'm going to be doing this long term. I'm going to do it. Now, just to have an extractor? And
I think for the average 2 hive, it's my second year I'm pulling a honey crop. Would you go get it? I'd say go get that.
Yeah.
If you're 4 years in and you borrowed one your first year, and now you borrowed one your first year at 2 hives, and now you're at 4 hives, and they're all 4 pulling in honey, and I'm looking at like 4 buckets of honey, right? Like, absolutely step up the game. Go to a Hilco who's offering some great low cost alternatives from import extractors.
Yeah, I always support Hilco, but man, Maxon's because they're expensive. Well, they're expensive compared to Hilco, and they're expensive compared to
Amazon.
a $200 one.
Yeah.
$200 one. It's probably, I would best $1,500 for the 9-frame extractor that I've got with everything on it.
Was that the kit or was that just the extractor?
That is the extractor with the basket, the legs, not motorized.
Yeah.
Right? Non-motorized.
But did it come with the uncapping tank?
It did not.
And filters?
No.
So
just the extractor.
So I wonder what the modern Dayton kit. So when I say kit, we're talking basic. Usually it's a 4-frame extractor. That is a hand crank on legs on a stand. An uncapping tank, which I feel is important. It's a place for you to set up your frame and hold your frame while you take an uncapping device. I typically like an electric heated knife, although you don't have to have one. I strongly recommend you have an electric heated knife. Again, it was one of those items that back in the day it was like an $80 tool. Now Amazon, it's like $20, right? So like the cost of all this stuff has really come down as China has moved into the market.
However, the one that you have is a $250 kit. Now $250 just the uncapping tank.
Just the untap. It's
$250.
But it's it's got a lid, right? So I can, after I've uncapped, I can comfortably hold 50 frames of uncappings in that, and then I put the top on it, and I just let it sit on my kitchen table for probably a week while it drains. I'll get in there with a knife and stir it around and let it really drain out.
Comfortably is a strong.
No, I am not aggressive in cutting my tops of my combs off. Unlike some people who might take a hatchet to their frames and like listen, they're open.
No,
they're open.
It is. I don't hatchet through them. I will say that I run 9 frames.
9 frames,
which they draw out wide, and I will trim those right back down to being.
Which means you wind up a lot more wax, a lot more volume in that,
a lot more wax in that capping tank.
Mm-hmm.
So I extracted 30 frames roughly, and was it full? No. Could it handle another 20 frames? Yeah, but it would be full at that point.
Do you crush and strain then with the
no? So the capping,
uncapping take. I mean,
yeah. So that's interesting. So my honey house has different tools than most people. I do have that uncapping tank. The uncapping tank, I usually let drip. However, I have a different tool.
You're a Man Lake uncapping tank, though, right?
The
gray one that's super deep.
One. Yeah. No, it's opaque. It's the same as yours. It's just an opaque plastic. So metal tray that sits inside of it. I think it's a Dadant one.
That is entirely different than mine.
I thought yours is a plastic.
Mine
tray.
is clear plastic.
Yeah.
It's actually
I have that one too in
a commercial. It's actually a commercial product made by the people that make all the commercial kitchen equipment. But anyway,
like DuPont or somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was repurposed I'm pretty sure it's been repurposed by Dadant for an uncapping tank. Air quotes here.
So mine has a metal base to it, metal insert to it, and but I also have a tool that is, I think, sold by Dadant. Maybe it's sold by somebody else, but it is a cappings spinner.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
And so you throw your cappings in. It has a little blade in the middle. It kind of breaks up your cappings, throws them to the wall, and then it all goes through a filter and it goes out, and then you have to filter it again because there's always some wax that gets through it. But so I have that one, and that one really makes the cappings powdery. Steve feeds his cappings back out to his bees.
Yeah,
which is a super easy way to do it, and
they clean it. So I might have 30 pounds of weight in that tank. And then I'll let it drain for a week, and I'll probably pull 20 pounds of honey off of it. Wow. And that means the cappings then are 10 pounds. I'll put that 10 pounds outside, and when I bring it back in, I might have a pound of wax.
Oh, wow.
Maybe.
But what you get back is nice. They chew it all up, and they leave you with nice little wax granules that are all light and fluffy. Like, they clean it up super well.
Yeah.
And they'll take some of the wax too. I'm like, hey, if you want to do something with that in the hive,
it's yours.
Yeah,
exactly.
Take it back. take it back.
Yeah. You also get other visitors. Bumblebees are my favorite ones that visit because they're like I had one visit just recently, and she was as big as my thumb. She was huge. Yeah, a little hovering. Yeah, you could hear her coming by.
Spaceship coming to get you.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of a bonus content here at the end of the podcast about our extracting setups, which, if there's some feedback on this week's episode, we can talk about it some more as we come up into extracting season. Yeah. We'll talk about all of our bounties, how well we did, and the challenges, some of the other things we can talk about. We'll put down notes about bottling tanks and how we've modified 5-gallon buckets with honey gates and been successful or not successful at that. And we'll include that for our next episode. So thanks for everybody for tuning in once again to another episode of Beekeeping Buddies. Thanks for listening.